Welcome to Carbon's DIY Garage. Today we are doing some preventative maintenance on this 2014 Chrysler 200. It's the 4-cylinder model and it's got the automatic transmission, the 40 TES. So anybody that has that 40 TES transmission, this video should work for you as well. Oh, and I should mention that the owner's manual says to do this every 120,000 miles. Mine's got 150,000 or so, and I'm sure previous owner never did this, so this will be the first time doing this job on this car, I'm pretty sure. So see if that makes it any more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the transmission fluid filter and the fluid itself, of course, and you do that by dropping the pan, getting the fluid all over the place because it's me, and if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that's kind of how I roll. Put the pan back on with a new gasket and fill it back up. Hope you don't have any leaks and you're good to go. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, down underneath the car now, this is the driver's side wheel well. I took the tires off just to make it easier to record this for you, but you don't have to do it. Remember, if you watched any of my other videos on this car, I don't have any of the closeouts that are down underneath the vehicle. So there normally is a closeout located here and some others that you're gonna have to remove first in order to get access to the transmission, which is right here on the driver's side. This is the bottom of the transmission pan, and you can see there are a bunch of these bolts that use a 10mm socket, and you just need to remove all of those bolts and it'll come right off. One thing to be aware of is that this plastic piece, the fender liner, does the pan is actually over top of it a little bit, so when you go to remove these bolts, you're going to have to navigate that, and when you drop the pan, you're going to have to drop it down and slide it over a little bit as well, so just be aware of that. And then the easiest way to do this is to loosen all of them first, and then let the back, this is my plan, let the back drop down, so leave these bolts up front installed a little bit, and let the back drop down to let the fluid start draining out. So I've got my catch pan underneath the transmission pan, and I'm using my 1/2-inch ratchet to break the torque on these bolts, and then I'll use my smaller ratchet to get them out, just trying to overcome the torque that's on these bolts. So a shout out to those of you that have supported the channel on Buy Me a Coffee or using Super Thanks. I was able to use some of that money to go buy these neoprene gloves, so maybe I won't get my hands completely soaking nasty when this transmission fluid goes where I don't want it to. So I'm just taking some of these bolts out, and then gonna leave some of them, especially the ones up here towards the radiator, halfway installed. And then I'll drop the pan here in the back. Since this pan has been on there for about 8 years, and I don't think it's ever been removed, I'm going to use my dead blow hammer to encourage it to release from the gasket. So I've got it draining a pretty good bit now, so I'm just going to let it go ahead and drain until it stops dripping, and then I'll get up in there and pull it down a little bit more. One thing I also decided to do was put some cardboard underneath my drain pan, because this stuff is going to splatter further than my pan will catch, so think about doing that as well. So now I'm just backing off these two bolts to let it angle down more, drain more out. One thing you got to keep in mind is that there's still going to be fluid up in the filter, and then also dripping from the transmission. So make sure you have your catch container underneath the transmission when we actually drop the pan down. And then we just pour the rest of the fluid here out of the pan. And then set the pan aside. And there we go, got the pan off. Now to remove the filter. And there's nothing holding it up there, no screws or anything. You just need to reach up, give it a twist, and pull it down. Like I said, there's fluid in the filter, so be ready for that. And hopefully this will show up on the video, but there is an O-ring on the filter right here, and you need to make sure it comes out with the filter. It may not, and that's okay, and if it's not, there is a, you just reach up here inside the transmission and get it out. You might need to use a small pick or a small screwdriver to get it out, but make sure you get this O-ring out, and a new O-ring will come with your new filter. Alright guys, so here's the drain pan and here's the old filter, and it looks like the old gasket was actually RTV, so I'm going to have to go ahead and scrape all the old RTV off, get this to be a nice clean surface. Use rags and some brake cleaner to clean all of this out. This is the obviously the old filter with the old O-ring. Like I said, here's the new filter, and it comes with its own new O-ring. And then these two posts are on there. That also helps keep it in place when you put it back into the transmission. One other thing to show you is this guy right here. That is a magnet, and that is what collects all of the small fine metal particles when your transmission's running. Keep the fluid clean and clear, and it should look like this and not have big chunks, and you'll need to clean that off as well. But this looks like a really healthy transmission. Go ahead and get this all cleaned up, and I'll clean up the mating surface on the underside of the transmission as well, and then we'll throw the new filter in. Before I start cleaning off the transmission, I just want to show you what it looks like under here. We're looking at the front of the vehicle. You can see that there's a little bit of RTV on the sealing surface. I need to clean that off. But this is what the underside of the transmission looks like. Like I said, it's going to continue to drip when you have the filter off, so keep your catch can underneath there. And you can see this is the hole where the filter actually plugs into, and this is the little area where the O-ring goes. And I don't know if it shows up on the video, but there's a little bit of orange here. It's a little bit of leftover from the O-ring. So when I clean off the sealing surface, I'm going to clean off the inside of this bore as well, just to get it all clean and smooth so it all goes back together nicely. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put the new filter in. It's got that O-ring. It's got these two posts that go into the holes here in the bottom of the transmission, and of course it goes up here into this hole. And you really it's just a press fit. Pretty straightforward. And that's all it is to put the new filter in. Those two pegs go up into the transmission, and obviously the big spout goes up into the bottom of the transmission with that O-ring, and it just snaps into place, and that's it. Here's the new gasket that came with the filter. The pan surface is all cleaned off, also cleaned off on the bottom of the transmission. When you're using the scraper, you want to make sure you take your time, get it all nice and smooth, get all the remnants of the old gasket or the RTV off. At the same time, be careful not to put gouges into the pan or into the transmission housing, because you need this to be a nice smooth surface in order for everything to seal up properly. Don't forget to put your magnet back in after you've cleaned that off, and then just line up the gasket if that's where you're going instead of you doing the RTV. Line up the gasket. I'm going to put a couple of bolts in at the corners to get it all lined up and held in place, and then I'll go ahead and put all the bolts in loosely just to get it secured up against the transmission before torquing it down. now that they're all snugged up, and torque it in a crisscross pattern, just like your lug nuts or anything else. So, and then just work your way around. You can do it in multiple stages. For torque values, I've seen on one video where they said 19 foot-pounds, and that's 240 inch-pounds, and that seems like, to me, too high of a torque, and you run the risk of stripping the bolt or breaking it. I've seen other videos where they say 105 inch-pounds, and that's what I'm used to for these type of bolts. So I'm going to go with 105 inch-pounds. We'll see if that is sufficient, and if the transmission leaks, then I'll up the torque after that. But I'm going with 105 inch-pounds on these. So this car calls for 4 quarts of ATF plus 4 transmission fluid. While the jack stands are still under the car, I'm going to go ahead and put the first 3 quarts in and look for leaks. And then I'll put the tires on and put it back on the ground. Alright, there were no leaks, so I went ahead and put the tires on, put the vehicle back on the ground, put another half a quart in, so there's like 3.5 quarts into the transmission right now. A key is you don't want to overfill it. So next thing I'm going to do, I've got the car running, I'm going to slowly go through all the gears, one at a time, just to get that fluid flowing through the transmission. And then we'll leave it running and go check the amount of fluid that's in the transmission and then get it to the right level. Checking the fluid levels pretty easy. Just take your wiped off dipstick, put it in, push it down all the way, pull it back up, and you should see fluid. And mine is not yet up to the bottom hole. It's just barely there, so it needs to definitely have some added. So I'll go ahead and add a half a quart and see what that does. So I went ahead and put in the rest of that first 4 quarts, and you can see it got up to the top of that cold hash mark, which is where I want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and call it good, and then drive it around for about a week or so, and then check the level of the fluid and top it off if I need to. But I definitely don't want to overfill it, so we're going to leave it like this and call it a day. So thanks for watching. I hope the video's been helpful. I appreciate your support of the channel, either hitting that thumbs up, subscribe, super thanks, buy me a coffee if you want to contribute financially. But just watching, dropping comments in the comments section, that really helps build the channel and keeps me going with new projects. So until that next video, you guys take care and have a good one.